Good afternoon to everyone. Let's begin today's lecture. In the last lecture, we were looking at PDAs, right, which are just push-down automata. Right? So these are abstractions of real-world machines, right? So they differ from finite state automaton in the fact that they have a stack with them. And in the last lecture, we defined two ways, right, for the language of this PDA, right? The strings that are accepted by the PDA. So the PDA can accept a string either through the final state, right? In the sense that if you process the entire string, right, beginning from the start configuration and in the final configuration, if you reach one of the final states, then the string will be accepted. Right? So this is one way of defining the language of the PDA. And the other way is through empty stack, right? Where if you process the entire string beginning from the start configuration and at the end, right, if you after processing the entire string, if the stack is empty, irrespective of what is the state, you will accept that string. So these two notions of languages, so we saw that these two notions are actually equivalent, right? In the sense that if you have a PDA, right, and if you take its language uh, through one of these two definitions, right? So for example, if you take its language through acceptance by final state, then there exists another PDA whose language will be the same, right? But this will be defined using the acceptance by the empty stack criterion, right? And similarly, vice versa as well. So, in general, whenever you design a PDA, you can define whatever acceptance criteria that's easier. Right? So in today's lecture, right, what we'll do, right, is we're going to show that these PDAs, in terms of language defining power, are equivalent to that of context-free grammars. Right? So far, I have sort of informally said that PDAs also define context-free languages. But today, we will formally show that, in fact, they are equivalent to context-free grammars. Right? So which means that the language class that's accepted by PDS is the same as the class of context-free languages. So in fact, right, so you can see that since a PDA is nothing but a finite state automaton, in particular an epsilon NFA, but with this additional stack component, every regular language definitely is going to have a PDA which accepts that language, right? Because a regular language will have an epsilon NFA, and you can easily convert this epsilon NFA to a PDA by simply ignoring whatever is there on the stack. So, which means that the class of languages that are accepted by PDAs must at least contain the regular languages, right? And we have seen some examples of languages which are not regular, but for which there exists PDAs, right? So, for example, we have seen the 0 and 1 end language and a couple more languages, right? Which were not regular, but there exists a PDA for them. So it's definitely, so the language class of PDAs is definitely bigger than that of regular languages. And so in fact, today we'll show that it's the same as the class of context-free languages. So for that, we will do two procedures. So we'll see two procedures. So we'll see how to convert an arbitrary context-free grammar to a PDA, and then how to convert an arbitrary PDA to a context-free grammar. So, are there any questions regarding the last lecture or okay? So, apart from the fact that so why is this? Why do we care about the language class, right, of PDAs? Right? So apart from the fact that we want to know whether or not it is the same as the class of context-free languages, there are also other advantages, right, of having two different representations of the same language class. So we saw that for the class of regular languages, right, there are multiple representations. So Vineet is asking that it can be implemented on machines. So I'm not sure. So are you asking that push-down automaton can be implemented on machines? Yes. So the deterministic push-down automaton can be implemented on machines, and it's in fact what parsers do. Right? So a parser is nothing but a deterministic push-down automaton. But so we will see, right, that this class of deterministic push-down automaton is the class of languages of the deterministic PDA is smaller than the context-free languages. Right? So it's actually called deterministic context-free languages. So we will actually see this later on. So we'll have a short uh, uh, a short summary of this ECFS. But yes, deterministic PDAs can be implemented on machines. Right? So as I was saying, right, so there are advantages of having multiple representations of the same language class. So just like for regular languages, we had multiple representations. Right? So we had DFAs, NFAs, epsilon NFAs, and we also had regular expressions. Uh, and we saw that if we wanted to prove some property of the class of languages, the class of regular languages, say closure property or uh, or any of the decision properties, then it was useful to pick one of the representations. Right? So for example, for something like union, so to prove that regular languages are closed under union or say concatenation, right? We actually used the regular expression representation. So because regular expressions are exactly defined through union, concatenation, uh, and the Kleene star operation, right? However, in order to prove that regular languages are closed under intersection, we used the DFA representation, right? And we constructed this product automaton from the two automaton, right? So therefore, whenever we're trying to prove properties about class of languages, then it's useful to have multiple representations. And here, right, so for the class of context-free languages, we have one representation, which is CFG, which is how we defined context-free languages, right? So we said that a language is context-free if there exists a grammar, right? If there exists a context-free grammar, uh, which basically defines that language. Right? So it will be useful to have another representation of context-free languages in the form of PDAs. Right? So both CFGs and PDAs will be useful to basically prove properties of the class of context-free languages. And obviously, so PDAs are representations of machines, right? So they are algorithmic in nature, right? In the sense that you perform some computation, right, at every step. Right? So you change the state, you read a symbol from the input, right, and then you also change the stack. Right? So this is very algorithmic in nature. As opposed to a context-free grammar, right, which has this sort of recursive formulation. Right? So we recursively define what are the strings that are that correspond to the grammar of that correspond to the language of context-free grammar. Right? So it's not so algorithmic in order to find out what are the strings in a context-free grammar, right? Or to even determine whether or not a string is present in the language defined by grammar. Well, if you have a PDA, then we can, for example, simply run the PDA, right, in order to find out whether or not a string is present in the language of the PDA. So yeah, so it's also easier as a human, like, in order to see how a PDA defines a language, right? So, for example, how the PDA recognizes this balanced parenthesis language, right? The 0 and 1n. It's very easy to see because for every 0 it pushes a marker, and then for every 1 it pops a marker. So if the stack is empty, then the string contains the equal number of zeros and ones. But it's not so easy when we actually saw the grammar for this 0 and 1. So there are many advantages, therefore, of showing that the class of languages of basically showing this conversion, right, between CFGs and PDAs, right. However, yeah, so we need to formally prove this, right. So we need to show that if you have a PDA, right, then the language of this. So in order to show that the language of this PDA is a context-free language, we need to construct another grammar. We need to construct a context-free grammar such that the language of this context-free grammar is the same. And similarly, the other way around as well. So if you're given a CFG, then you need to construct a PDA whose language will be the same. So that's the motivation behind why we are interested in this conversion. Right? So let's get started with the first conversion, which is converting context-free grammar to push-down automata. So so what does this mean? Right? So we are given a context-free grammar, right? Which means so context-free grammar, right? Just to revise, basically consists of 4 components. Right? So there is the set of non-terminals, then terminals, there is the set of production rules, and then there are we have the start symbol S, right? And the language of this context free grammar is the set of all terminal strings that you can derive from the start symbol using the production rules. Right? So, so we saw this derivation definition, right? So basically at every step of the derivation, we are going to we are going to replace, right, one of the non-terminals, right, uh, with the body of the production rule whose head is that particular non-terminal, right? So by a sequence of derivations, if the whatever terminal string that we can derive from the start symbol S, that will exactly be the set of the that will exactly be the language of this context free grammar. So now we need to convert this to a PDA, right? Which means that if you're given this context free grammar, we need to come up with a push-down automaton whose language is the same, right? Which means that uh, so for example, let's say we use the empty stack criterion, right? So then we need to basically construct a PDA which from the start configuration, right, takes exactly those strings to the empty stack configuration, right, which can also be derived from the start symbol S. So that's what we need to figure out. So let's start this process. So let G be a CFG, and suppose L is the language of G. So we will construct a PDAP such that n of p is equal to L. Right? So I'm using n of p here. So this notation n of p is the so here the acceptance criteria is empty stack. Right? So which means we are going to construct this PDAP, and the language of this PDA that we're going to consider is the set of all strings which empty the stack of the PDA. Right? So so what are the components of a PDA? Right? So PDA has a set of states, and it has stack alphabet, input alphabet. So let me write that down as well. Right? So we have a set of states. We have the input alphabet, we have the stack alphabet. Uh, so we have the transition function, and then we have the start state. We have the start symbol, the start stack symbol, and then we have the set of final states. Right? So since we are considering acceptance by the empty stack, the set of final states is going to be empty. So we are not really interested in the final states, right? Because we are going to consider the acceptance criteria to be the empty stack criteria. Right? So let's define all of these components. So since we are considering acceptance by the empty stack criterion, the state space is going to be very simple, right? So P is only going to have one state, which is Q. Right? So this is one state of the PDA. The input symbols, which is the input alphabet, right, is going to be the same as the terminals of G. Right? So this sigma is basically going to be the same as this sigma. Right? The input alphabet is the same. However, the stack symbols are going to be all symbols of G. So which means that gamma, so this gamma is actually going to be n union sigma. So it's going to be both the set of non-terminals and terminals of the grammar. And the start stack symbol, which is this bot, is going to be the start symbol of G. Right? So bot is going to be S. And this is fine, right? Because we said that the stack alphabet is the set of all non-terminals, includes the set of all non-terminals of G, and S is a non-terminal, right? It's a start symbol. So that's why, so that will be the start state. That will be the start stack symbol, right? So the start configuration of this particular PDA is basically going to be Q, since that's the only state, the word W that we're trying to process, and S, which is present on the stack. So this is the start configuration of this particular PDA. So let's, before looking at the transitions, right, let's try to intuitively understand how this PDA is going to accept the same language. Right? So what we will do, right, is that so this PDA is basically going to mimic the derivation process of a string. Right? So it will basically keep the so it's going to mimic the in particular it's going to mimic the leftmost derivation of a string. So in the stack, right, it's basically going to keep the left sentential form, right, which is the sentential form that that can be derived like using leftmost derivations from the start symbol. Right? And at every step of this PDA, we are basically going to do a step of the leftmost derivation, right? Which means we will basically pick out the leftmost non-terminal that is present on the stack, uh, and we are going to replace it by its body. And so that's what we do in a leftmost derivation. Right? So we pick out the leftmost non-terminal in the in the sentential form, and then we use one of the production rules. Right? So one of the production rules where this particular non-terminal is the head, and we replace it by its body. Right? So that's exactly what we'll do. Right? So we'll pop out this non-terminal from the stack, and then we'll push the body of the production rule onto the stack. And that's fine because the stack symbol is uh, uh, the stack alphabet, right, is both the set of terminals and non-terminals. Right? So yeah, so that's what we'll do, right? So given the input W, P is going to step through the leftmost derivation of W from the start symbol S. But since P doesn't know what this derivation is, right, or even what the end of W is, it basically uses non-determinism to guess the production to use at each step. So at every step of the machine, right, we have to use some production rule, but there could be multiple production rules, right, which could be valid, right, because there could be multiple production rules with the same non-terminal as the head. So that's why the machine is basically going to guess, right, which is the particular production rule to use. Right? That's where it will use the non-determinism, right? So that if there is some execution of the machine, right, which leads you to emptying the stack, right, then there exists some left. Then there exists a leftmost derivation of the particular string as well. Okay. So as I said, at each step, P is going to represent the left sentential form, which is the step of a leftmost derivation. So beginning from the start symbol S, right? If we consider a series of leftmost derivations, then whatever you derive, right, so this alpha is called the left sentential form. And we are going to represent this left sentential form in P. Right? So in particular, how we are going to represent the left sentential form. Right? So if the stack of P is alpha, right, and P has so far consumed X from its input, right, where X is a terminal string, right? So remember, we are saying from its input. Right? So if it has consumed X from its input, and if the stack of P contains alpha, right, then P represents the left sentential form X alpha. Right? So this is the inductive invariant, right? This is the invariant that we will maintain at every step of P. Right? So at every step of P, we can either consume a string, or we can either consume a symbol from the input, or we'll use a production tool. So this is the intuition, right? So let's formalize this, right, and hopefully things will become more clear. So at empty stack, the input consumed is going to be a string in LG. So let's write down the transition function of P, right? So as I said, there is just one sorry. So there is just one state Q that P has, right? And so the start symbol is which is S, which is also the start stack symbol of P, right? So at every step of this particular PD, right, we are going to mimic a derivation, right, of a particular. So we are basically going to mimic the leftmost derivation of the string, right? So which means that so so the derivation steps, right, are not going to consume anything from the input, right? So they're going to be epsilon transitions, right? So let me just write down the transition first, and then that will be easier, right? So we'll have epsilon transitions where if I see that some A is on the top of the stack, right, and if there is a production rule of the form, let's say A generates gamma, right, then I'm going to pop A from the stack, and I'm going to push gamma onto the stack. Right? So if A is on the top of the stack and A is a non-terminal, and if there is a production rule of the form A generates gamma, right, which belongs to P, then I'm going to pop A and I'm going to push gamma onto the stack. On the other hand, right, if the input symbol is A, right? The next input symbol that I'm processing is A. And if this A is also present on the top of the stack, then I'm going to simply remove it. So I'm simply going to pop out this A from the stack. So this is it. Right? So these are the only two. Transitions, right, that are present on the transition function of P. So at every step, I either consume an input symbol, right? But if I consume it, then it must be present on the top of the stack. Right? And if the top of the stack contains a non-terminal, then I'm going to use a production rule for that particular non-terminal. Yeah. So these are the only two rules, right? So we have type 1 rules and type 2 rules. So the type 1 rules are for all terminals A, right? So for all, so this is basically for all A belongs to sigma. So we have a production rule of the form delta QAA is equal to Q comma epsilon, right? So this means that if the current state is Q, if the next input symbol to be read is A, and if A is present on the top of the stack as well, then I'm going to simply pop A and not push anything. So this step does not change the left sentential form. It's LSF stands for left sentential form that is represented, but it moves the responsibility for A from the stack to the consumed input. Right. So uh, and then we have type 2 rules, which says that if A generates alpha is a production of G, then Q epsilon and A is going to contain Q comma alpha. So this is an epsilon transition, so it doesn't consume anything from the input. And if this non-terminal A is present on the top of the stack, then I'm going to pop A and I'm going to push this alpha, but this alpha must be a body of a production rule whose head is A. So we basically guess a production for A, and then we represent the next left sentential form in the derivation. So now that we have defined this particular PDA, right, we need to show that its language is the same as the language of G. Right? So the language of G, right, is basically, as we just said, right, it is the set of strings, right, which can be derived, the set of terminal strings which can be derived from the start symbol. Right? So in particular, right, if there is a leftmost derivation of W, right, so W is present in L of G. If and only if there is a leftmost derivation of W from S. Right? And we just said that this language of P, right? So this should basically be N of P. So since we are considering the acceptance criteria to be empty stack, so which means that I am basically considering all the so I consider a configuration which can be reached right from the start configuration. So the start configuration is going to be Q, W, and S. So if through a sequence of moves, right, if this particular configuration goes to Q epsilon epsilon, then W is going to be present in N of P. So we need to show that both of these are the same. That both of these languages are actually the same. So if there is a left sentential form, or rather if there is a derivation, right, beginning from S, then if there's a derivation of W beginning from S, then there must also be the sequence of moves in the PDA, right, which will result to W being accepted, and vice versa. So to show this, we will we have already intuitively seen what is the property that we are going to maintain. Is that at every step the PDA is going to maintain some left sentential form. Right? So let's formalize that particular property. Right? So we will show this. Right? So we'll show that for any W, X, and alpha, right? If beginning from this configuration, right, Q, W, X, and S, this particular configuration goes to the configuration Q, X, and alpha for any W, X, and alpha, then this will happen if and only if there is a leftmost derivation from S to W alpha. So as I said, right, so the W, so when we go from this configuration to this configuration, then we are consuming W, right? W is consumed, and alpha is still present on the stack. Right? So So the invariant that we maintain is that whatever is consumed from the input and whatever is present on the stack, that's always a left sentential form. So since W is consumed from the input and alpha is present on the stack, therefore this must W alpha must be a left sentential form, which means that there must exist a leftmost derivation of W alpha beginning from S. So how does this result, right, help us in showing that the language of P is the same as the language of G? So the question is that instead of directly showing this, right, we want to show these things, that L of G is equal to N of P, but instead of showing this, we are going to show this particular property. Right? But why is it that this property implies that N of P is actually equal to L of G? Okay, so finally, when alpha is equal to epsilon, okay, thanks, Sanjit. So Sanjit is saying that, so at the end, right, uh, alpha is actually going to become epsilon because there will be nothing on the stack. So, but how does that imply that this W, right, is derived from S? So remember that the final configuration, right, you must also consume the entire string. So which means that I must also consume this X itself, right? So basically, in this particular claim, right, if we substitute X equal to epsilon and alpha equal to epsilon, right? Uh, so then we will get that from QWS, right? If I go to Q epsilon epsilon, then this will happen if and only if there is basically a leftmost derivation from S to W. Right? So if I substitute X equal to epsilon and alpha equal to epsilon, right, which is what I need to do, right? Because uh, a word, right, a W string is accepted by this particular PDA only after consuming the entire string, right? The stack is empty, right? So which means that X must also be empty and alpha must also be, so X must be epsilon and alpha must also be epsilon, right? And if we substitute that, then we'll get that there must exist a leftmost derivation of S as well. So that's why it's enough to prove this result. Okay, so this proof is actually very straightforward, right? So I will only do one direction, which is this only if direction. So this means that so if right, uh, so if beginning from the start configuration of the machine of the PDA, right, this QWXS, if you reach some configuration QXA, then this implies that there must exist a leftmost derivation of W alpha from S. So that's the direction that I'm going to show, which is this direction. And we will do this by using induction on the number of steps which are made by P. So basically, we are saying that beginning from this configuration, right, I reach this configuration in some number of steps. Right? So I'm going to use induction on the number of steps that are required by P in order to show this result. So the first case is that there are 0 steps which are required by P, right, in order to go from the first configuration to the start configuration to this end configuration. Okay. So what happens if there are 0 steps which are required? So since there are 0 steps, right, it means that you're not really consuming anything. Right? So which means that W is actually equal to epsilon. And in 0 steps, you won't change the stack as well, right? So which means that alpha must be equal to S. So essentially, we are going from Qx and S to Qx and S. So this is the only thing that I can do uh, in uh, in 0 steps, right? So if this is the case, right, then I need to show that there must exist leftmost derivation from S to W alpha. So since W is epsilon and alpha is S, so this means that there must exist leftmost derivation from S to S. And this is again true. So, so this is how we define this star operator, right? That there always exists a derivation from a particular sentential form to itself. So the basis is trivial here. So, okay, so now let's go to the inductive step. So in the inductive step, we are going to consider n moves of P. Right? So which means that in n moves, right? Let's say that the PDAP goes from this configuration QWXS to QX alpha. And we assume that the inductive hypothesis holds for any sequence of n minus 1 moves. So for n minus 1 moves, the result holds, and we show that it continues to hold for n moves as well. Okay, so we are going to basically case split on what is the last move, right? So since the very last move, right? So there are only two types of moves. There are two types of transitions that that this PDA can make, right? So either it's type 1 or type 2. Right? So we'll consider both the cases for this last move, and we'll use the inductive hypothesis. Right? So let's consider the first case, right? So in the first case, we are basically using a transition of type 1. So this transition of type 1 is basically of this form, right? So if you are in Q, and if you consume A, right, and if A is also there on the stack, then you are basically going to just remove it from the stack. So after this particular transition, right, so this is the last transition, the nth transition, we are basically reaching this particular step. So what can you say about the configuration before this particular move? So we need to make this move, right, at the last step. Right? So which means that A must be the next symbol that's to be consumed, right? Uh, so A must be the next symbol that's to be consumed, and obviously X is remaining, right? And A must also be on the top of the stack, and alpha should be in the remaining of the stack, so that after doing a type 1 transition, I'm going to consume X, right? And I'm going to consume so I'm going to consume A from the input, and I'm also going to pop A from the stack. So I'm going to reach QX alpha. Right? So this is the very last move that I make. Uh, so now, right, since we started from this W X, right, and so I can write W as something like YA, right, because I know that so I'm going to start with Q, W, X, and S, right? But whenever I reach, so after n minus 1 steps, right, I must have consumed everything from W except A, right? So which means that so the very last symbol of W must be A, right? And let's assume that the prefix of W, that's the thing before A, is Y. So I have YAX S, and this in n minus 1 steps goes to YAXA alpha, and in the very last step, I basically go to QX alpha. So now, right, so for this sequence of n minus 1 moves, I can assume the inductive hypothesis, right? So the inductive hypothesis says that if your PDA makes the transitions, a sequence of transitions, right, from QYAXS to QAX alpha, right, then there exists a derivation, there exists a leftmost derivation from S of what, right? So of whatever you have consumed and whatever is left on the stack, right? So I have consumed Y, So therefore, y will be there, and then whatever is left on the stack, right, which is this a alpha. So there's going to exist a leftmost derivation of y a alpha from S. So this is by the inductive hypothesis. Okay. So and now, right, I need to show that so since there exists a sequence of moves, right, a sequence of moves of n moves, right, from qyxs to qx alpha, I need to show it. What do I need to show? So I need to prove that there exists there exists a leftmost derivation from S of whatever I have consumed, so which is ya, and whatever is left in the stack, which is alpha. So in this case, you can clearly see, right, that whatever I want to prove, right, is directly evident from what I assumed, or what I can infer from the inductive hypothesis. So this particular direction is done. So is this clear to everyone? Are there any questions? So this is the case that I've considered, where in the last move, right, in the nth move, I'm using a transition of type 1. And based on that, I have basically inferred what should be the configuration just before that particular transition. And uh, and the rest of the transitions can also be inferred based on this particular configuration. Yeah. So this is saying the same thing. So if you use a type 1 rule at the very end, then the move sequence must be of this form, right? Where in the very last step, right, I must have AX. A should be the next input to be consumed, and A should also be present on the top of the stack, which means that at the very beginning, right, A must already be present, right? And using the inductive hypothesis, I can easily prove the required result. So now let's consider the second case, right, where I'm using a type 2 rule. Okay. So again, so the final configuration is going to be of the form Q, X, and alpha. And I want to use a type 2 rule here, right? So in a type 2 rule, right, what do we do? So type 2 rule of this form, right? So we have, so if A is present on the top of the stack, so this is an epsilon transition, so we don't consume anything from the input. And if A is present on the top of the stack, then we are going to remain in the same state, and we are going to replace A with gamma. Right? If there is a production of the form, A generates gamma. So this is a type 2 rule. So now, after the application of this type 2 rule, right, what can I say about about the last two configurations? Right? So the state must be the same. Right? I don't consume anything from the input. Right? So that's why the input is still X, and A must be present on the top of the stack. So let's say that there is some A beta that's there on the top of the stack. So now, after I use this type 2 rule, this alpha will be gamma beta, because I'm going to remove A, and then I'm going to push gamma. So I'm going to pop A, and I'm going to push gamma. So that's why this should be the last configuration. And I start with QW and QWX and S. So in n minus 1 moves, I go to QX and A beta, and then in the very last step, I go to QX and then gamma beta. Okay. So again, I can use the inductive hypothesis here, right? So by the inductive hypothesis, I can say that there must exist a leftmost derivation from S, right, of whatever is consumed, which is W, and whatever is left on the stack, which is this A beta. So now, right, since W is a terminal string, right, this means that A is the leftmost non-terminal that is present, right? So which means that in the next step of the leftmost derivation, I'm going to use one of the production rules. Right? So I can definitely use this production rule A to gamma. Right? So which means that I will have, I can derive W, gamma, and then beta. However, this is exactly, so this, sorry. So this particular left sentential form exactly corresponds to this configuration, right? Because I have consumed W and the gamma beta is present on the stack. So whatever is consumed and whatever is present on the stack, the concatenation of these two is exactly the left sentential form, right? That can be derived from S. So yeah, so this basically completes the proof for the type 2 result as well. Okay. So what we have proved is the only if part, right? Which means that if the machine, right, if the PDA after a sequence of moves, right, goes from one configuration to other configuration, then whatever is represented by the machine, right, or by the PDA, is a left sentential form, right? But we also need to consider the other direction, which is that if you consider something that can be derived, right? If you consider left sentential form, so if you consider derivation from leftmost derivation from S to W alpha, then there must also exist a sequence of moves in the machine, right? Right, such that after the last configuration, right, after this moves, will exactly represent that particular left sentential form. So again, here you have to use the induction on the number of steps in the leftmost derivation, but the ideas are very same, uh, very similar to what we used in the only if part. So I'm leaving this as a homework. So this basically completes the proof that the PDA that we constructed uh, exactly represents the CFG. So so beginning from a CFG, right? We have now constructed a PDA which whose language, right, is the same as the language of the CFG. So this basically proves that the class of languages, right, of the PDA at least contains context-free languages. Right? So because for every context-free language there exists a context-free grammar, and we showed that for every context-free grammar there also exists a PDA. So which means that for every context-free language there also exists a PDA which is going to accept that language. So now we are going to show the other direction, right, which is that every language that a PDA accepts is the context-free language. For that, we have to show that for every PDA there exists a context-free grammar. So yeah, so this basically this is just repeating what I told earlier, right? That how is it that this particular inductive invariant that showed is enough to show this is enough to complete this proof from the CFG to PDA. So now let's go from a PDA to a CFG. So okay, so now we start from a PDA, right? And we consider the language that is defined by this PDA. So there are two ways of defining it. So here I'm assuming, here I'm considering the language that is defined through the empty stack, right? Which means all those strings which take the PDA from the start configuration to the configuration where the input is consumed and the stack is empty. So L is equal to N of T. So we'll construct a context-free grammar G such that L is equal to L of G. So which means that for every string that is accepted by the PDA, there is going to exist a derivation of that string using the production rules of G. Right? And intuitively, what we will do, right, is that we will basically have variables in G, such that each of these variables are going to generate exactly those strings, those input strings that cause the PDAP to have the net effect of popping a stack symbol X while going from state P to state Q. So intuitively, right? So why are we interested in this, right? So remember that we are interested in all of those strings, right? Which so let's say Q0 is the start state, right? So beginning from the start configuration, right? If I reach the end configuration, right, where the entire string is consumed and nothing is present on the stack. So these are the strings in which I'm interested in, right? Which basically take me from the start configuration to this configuration where the stack is empty. So we will do this for every stack symbol. Right? So we will say that So basically for any state, let's say P, right? If some stack symbol X is present, sorry. So let's say that if some stack symbol X is present on the stack, and if I consider all of those strings which will pop out that particular stack symbol, right? So which means I can go to any state Q, right? But I must have consumed the string and I must have popped out this particular stack symbol, right? So all of these strings W, right, which pop out a stack symbol X, right, while going from state P to Q, they will be represented by symbols and by non-terminals in the grammar, right? So we will introduce non-terminals in the grammar for each of these type of strings. So let's make this a bit more formal, right? So the variables, right, the non-terminals of this grammar are going to be of this form, right? Pxq. So this is a single non-terminal, right? Even though it seems like it's a string of symbols, right? But it's basically a string. It's a single non-terminal. And intuitively, right, this Pxq is, so you can basically, you consider all the strings that you can derive from this Pxq, uh, from this particular non-terminal Pxq, using the production rules of this grammar, right? Then all of the strings must be exactly those strings which pop out X while going from P to Q, right? So beginning from P and W, if X is present on the stack, then there must exist a sequence of moves of the PDA, which is going to pop out this X. So you can see that if we can actually define this Pxq, right, then we can easily define the language, the language of the particular PDA, right? The language of the PDA using all the variables, right? So because we want to ultimately remove bot, right? So if I consider all the non-terminals, right, of the form, let's say Q0 bot and P, right, for all P, where Q0 is the start symbol and P is some state of the PDA. Right? So now all the strings that I can derive from terminals of this form, right, they will exactly correspond to the language of the PDA, right? Because they take me from the start configuration to some state where bot is finally removed from the stack. Right? So, and those are exactly the strings that will be present in the language of the PDA itself. So this is the intuition behind why we're defining this. So we are sort of breaking down the problem, right? This larger problem of defining strings which basically remove bot from the stack, and we are breaking down into smaller problems, sub-problems, right? Where we are considering this for every stack symbol X, right? Instead of just the bottom stack symbol, or instead of the start stack symbol. So yeah, so as I said, so this Pxq is going to generate all and only those strings W, which basically take the PDA from P to Q, from state P to state Q, consuming the string W, and they pop X from the stack. So the start symbol S, as I said, is going to be defined in terms of these other non-terminals. So we'll see that later. Right? So, but I already intuitively told you what this particular start symbol is going to be. So now let's define the productions of G. Okay. So as I said, each production for Pxq is going to come from a move of P, right, in state P with stack symbol X. So whenever I consider a production rule for Pxq, I want to maintain this invariant, right? That whatever I derive from Pxq must basically remove X from the stack and lead me to P and lead me to the state Q. So let's consider the simplest case. So suppose that delta PAX contains Q comma epsilon. So now if delta PAX contains Q comma epsilon, right, then I can definitely say that if the input string is just A, right, and if X is there in the top of the stack, then in a single move, right, on a single transition, I will move to this configuration where I will consume epsilon, I will consume A, and I'm also going to pop out X because it contains Q comma epsilon. Right? So I'm going to change from P to Q, right, and I'm going to pop out X, and I'm not going to push anything. So that's why the end configuration is going to be epsilon epsilon. So in this case, this A is a string, right, that I can that basically changes the state of the PDA from P to Q, and it removes X in the stack. So that's why I can add this particular production rule, right, which is that PXQ must generate A. Right? So the production PXQ generates A is added. Right? So A can be also epsilon, right, because we are also allowing epsilon transitions in the PDA itself. So PXQ generates A because reading A is one way to pop X and to go from P to Q. So now let's consider the second case, right, where this PAX, delta of PAX contains R comma Y. So what does this mean, right? So in terms of configurations, right, if I start with, let's say A and some W, okay, and if X is on the stack, then I'm going to consume A, and I'm going to replace X with Y, right? Because delta Px contains R comma Y, right? Which means that X will be popped out and Y will be popped in. So the state will change to Q. I'm going to consume A, and I'm going to replace the stack where X will be popped out and Y will be popped in. Right? But this is not what we want, right? So ultimately, we want to remove X itself, right? So I now, so in this case, it considers R comma Y. So therefore, the state is R. So in one step, I'm definitely not reaching the state, right? Because the state that I want to reach must be of the form Q uh, and then epsilon and then epsilon. Right? However, I can now sort of recursively use the fact, right, that from RWY, I want to reach epsilon epsilon, right? So these are exactly all of those strings which are generated by the symbol R and then Y and Q, because I want to remove Y from the stack now. So which means that the grammar, the production rule that I need to add is going to be PXQ is going to generate A and then RYQ. Right? So intuitively, right, from P, right, I can consume A and then go to some state R, okay? But I have pushed Y into the stack, and then any word in this particular, any word that is represented by this particular non-terminal is going to is going to move from R to Q. It's going to move the state from R to Q, and it's going to remove Y, which has the net effect of removing X itself from the stack. So yeah, so this is the production rule that we add, right? PXQ generates ARYQ. So we erase X, go from P to Q by reading A, and then entering the state R and replacing X by Y, and then reading some W that gets P from R to Q by erasing Y. So intuitively, right? So if you can derive any string AW, right, from PXQ, if and only if I can derive W from RYQ, and this is going to take me from P to Q, and it's also going to erase X in the stack. Okay. So this is how I can use, right, the strings which are represented by other symbols in order to represent the string of my own, right? In order to represent its own string. Okay. Okay. So let's do one more case, right, and then we'll end the lecture. Okay. So this is the case where I have a production rule of the form delta PX contains RYZ. So essentially, this means that if I am in state P, right, and if the next input that I read is A, and if X is in the stack, then I move to R, right, I consume A, and I replace X with YZ. Okay. So now, right, if I finally want to erase X, right, then I have to erase Y and I have to erase Z as well, beginning from the state R. Okay. So which means that there must exist some state S, right, where I erase Y, and then from S to Q I erase Z. So intuitively, right, this means that from this Px, so I must have this production rule, right, that in order to erase X and go from P to Q, uh, I basically first read the symbol A, right? So then I will go to R, but I have YZ on the stack. Yeah, so I have YZ on the stack. So I'm then going to remove this first remove Y. Right? So in order to remove Y, I will go to some state S, and then from S, I'm going to remove Z, and finally reach the state Q. So this S can be any state, right? So it can even be Q. That's also fine. So we have to add this production rule for all states S in the PDA, right? for all states S of the PDA. So since P is erased, so P basically replaces X by YZ. So to have the net effect of erasing X, P must erase Y, and then it must erase Z, right? While going through some intermediate state S. So picture, so you can also express this diagrammatically, right? So if the state is P, right, and if A is the next symbol that I'm going to consume, and if X is present on the stack, right, then I move to the state R, I consume A, and YZ is present on the stack. So now this entire string W has the effect of moving the state from R to S, right, and removing Y from the stack. And finally, the entire string X, right, has the effect of basically going from S to Q and then removing Z from the stack. So since we don't know S, we just generate a family of productions. Right? So we generate a family of productions of the form PXQ generates A, R, Y, S, and then SZQ. So this is done for all S. So whenever there is a production, so whenever there is a transition, right? So we said that from delta P AX, right? If this contains, right, a transition of the form R and then YZ. So whenever a transition of this form is present, then I must add this family of production rules. So similarly, you can do this for uh, any arbitrary set of stack symbols as well. Okay. So you can generalize this case now. So in the general case, if this delta Px contains R y1 up to yk, then for each of these yi's, I need to basically erase them, right? So for erasing them, I need to consider some intermediate states that I will go to. So therefore, I'm going to generate this family of productions, right? Where in order to erase y1, I use the state s1, and then for y2, I need to go from s1 to s2 and so on. Okay. So this is the family of productions that I need to generate for this particular transition. So we are almost done, right? So for every type of transition that is present in the PDA, I have generated like either a single production rule or a family of production rules, and then I can show that for uh, for any configuration, right, or for any sequence of configurations, or for any sequence of moves that are made by the PDA, I'm going to also generate that particular string, right, while removing the particular stack symbols. Okay. Since I'm out of time, right, so I'm going to end the lecture today, and we will finish the rest of this proof. So next week is break, right? So the next lecture is going to be after the break on Monday. Thank you.